Welcome back, everyone. I know the last Dossier video was a good number of months ago, but I was looking for some inspiration, if you will. And recently, because of a certain someone who I know watches my stuff, I have found my next Dossier topic, the Elder Scrolls. Specifically, I'm going to discuss and/or summarize the various races of the Elder Scrolls world, known as Nirn, or more specifically, the continent of Tamriel. I'll give the races a bit of backstory, their homeland, their traits, that sort of thing. It won't be crazy in-depth, as that would make this video turn into a much larger project that I would prefer not to do as a single whole. Perhaps I'll do more singular, in-depth videos on separate races later down the line. Who knows? But for now, we're here to talk about broad strokes, so let's get into it. Welcome to the races of Tamriel. Before we get into each individual race, I should explain the three different types of peoples in Tamriel. These are the races of men, mer, and beasts. These classifications are essentially the dividers between human-based races, elven races, and animal races. For example, the Nords are one of the races of men, where the Dunmer or Dark Elves are a race of mer, and the Khajiit are a beast race. If you couldn't tell already, this is why every elven race ends in their race name being mer, such as the Dunmer, Altmer, Bosmer, whatever. I should also point out that here I'm discussing the playable races in most Elder Scrolls games, which means we're not going over Dwemer, Falmer, Needs, etc., though there will be at least some minor backstory involving certain races, because for some of them you need to understand some of the backstory races to understand how they are now. But with that said, let us start off with humanity. To start off the races of men, we have the capital-dwelling Imperials. The Imperials are basically what you expect from fantasy Romans, even their common armor is styled after various eras of Roman history. They're not exactly known for physical strength, unlike their northern cousins, but they typically make up for it with a silver tongue and very deep pockets. While this does make them very skilled administrators, merchants, and diplomats, it also means they've gained a reputation for being more stuck-up and arrogant. Maybe it comes from their history of originally having rebelled against the now extinct Ayleid elves that enslaved them ages ago. On the subject of ancient elves, let's move on to the Bretons. The Bretons are a very interesting case, as they are actually half-elves. Originally, an elven race known as the Aldmer from the Somerset Isles went out and colonized and conquered Tamriel, causing them to gradually split into new forms of elves over time. In the land of High Rock, the Aldmer, having again enslaved the humans of the area, crossbred with the humans, and over time, the distinction between man and mer within High Rock effectively dissipated, leaving a race of half-bloods who both share many physical similarities with the Nords, while also wielding an innate magical talent descended from their Aldmer ancestor. This has also left the Bretons in High Rock with a very high medieval fantasy society of honor, castles, swords, and sorcery. To the south of High Rock, however, lies the vast lands of Hammerfell, and the natives known as the Redguards. Given the dry, heat, and mountainous desert lands comprising most of Hammerfell, the Redguards have adapted to it in every way, from their clothing all the way to their physiology, as their skin even has a slightly red tint to it depending on the person. After a chunk of the region had quite literally sunken into the ocean, conditions within Hammerfell grew harsher and harsher, and the ever-adaptive Redguards sought to overcome this as well, dedicating themselves to expanding outward, conquering the regions of Hammerfell once populated by Bretons and Orcs, leaving most of the region to the Redguards save for select Orc strongholds, which we will discuss later on. Through this, the Redguards are renowned warriors, famous for their ability to adapt to their environment quicker than most. And finally, we have the Nords, the warrior race that inhabits the northern lands of Skyrim. The Nords are exactly what you expect from a primarily Viking-themed race. They're famous for their ferocity in combat, their resistance to the cold, and their taste in mead. The Nords have a much more detailed yet ambiguous history than most, as they lacked a written language beyond runic carvings. They're the descendants of the Atmorans from a continent in the far north who rebelled against them and forged what would become the Cyrodiilic Empire through their extensive conquests and, famously, their use of the voice that was granted to them by the dragon deity Akatosh to expel the dragons and allow the mortal races to decide their own fates on Tamriel. Which leads us to our next subject, the Mer. The Mer are easily distinguished by their pointed ears, taller stature, and thinner bodies compared to most humans. On top of that, most Mer boast some sort of magical expertise or physical dexterity, with one example being the magically inclined Altmer. The Altmer are the descendants of the ancient Aldmer, who never left the Somerset Isles to colonize Tamriel. This has left them the most similar to their Aldmer ancestors, and they take pride in this, boasting a greater capacity for magic as well as believing themselves to be a more advanced and civilized people. The Altmer even believe themselves to be the direct descendants of the Aedra, the gods of the Elder Scrolls world. Those of you who we're talking about here. The Altmer have been taking to expansion and conquest in more recent centuries through the Aldmeri Dominion, even going to war with the Empire and claiming more and more territories as their own while attempting to subvert and subjugate the Empire from within, leaving most other peoples, especially humans, to hold a rather negative opinion towards the Altmer. On the complete other side of the Mer races, we have the Bosmer, or the Wood Elves, in comparison to the Altmer being the High Elves. The Bosmer are an anomaly. Clearly descended from the same ancestors as other Mer races, they are much shorter and much less magically inclined, save for the shamans. This could be a side effect of their homeland, the forest lands of Valenwood. Valenwood made them hone their acrobatics and dexterity, making them excellent archers and thieves on the side. However, the Bosmer also have a sort of deal made with their ancient deity. This deal is known as the Green Pact. The Green Pact grants the Bosmer the blessings of the deity Y'ffre, while prompting them to live by certain rules. The main rule of the pact is that the Bosmer are forbidden from harming or consuming any plant. This leaves them completely carnivorous and makes them reliant on stone or lumber imported from elsewhere for construction, as well as using bones to craft their weapons. The Bosmer are also infamously cannibalistic in accordance with the pact, including that they must consume their enemy's body after defeating them in combat, leaving the Bosmer isolated with not the best reputation except as hunters. Much more well-known, and arguably the most well-known of the elven races, are the Dunmer, or the Dark Elves. The Dunmer inhabit the land of Morrowind, a land known mostly as an ash-covered waste inhospitable to most life. But the Dunmer found a way, creating a society that is alien to even most other elven races, let alone human. The Dunmer came about as a result of their ancestors, the Chimer, betraying their Daedric god Azura by killing one of her chosen champions, Nerevar, and creating the tribunal to rule over them as god kings, rejecting Azura entirely. Azura punished the Chimer by turning their skin an ashen gray and their eyes blood red. And ever since then, the Dunmer have tended to isolate themselves from Morrowind, only interacting with the outside world in the form of the slave trade, an ancient practice most other races in Tamriel abhor. If anything, the fact that Outlanders despise this encourages the Dunmer to continue it, along with the rest of their ancient culture and practices. This has caused more than a few rifts between the Dunmer and the Empire, which has been trying to assimilate them for quite some time to minimal success. Because of this, and their rather lengthy past involving the Dwemer, ancient wars, Daedra worship, betrayal, etc., the Dunmer are not always seen in the best light, especially amongst the Nords, but most tolerate their presence, especially with their aptitude for magic and their general fortitude granted to them for living in volcanic ashlands in Morrowind. And lastly, we have the Orzmer, or the Orcs. Yes, the Orcs are in fact elves. Originally, the Orzmer were a branch of Altmer who worshipped a powerful ancestor spirit known as Trinimac, but Trinimac was soon consumed and corrupted into the Daedric prince Malekith. The creation of Malekith changed the Orcs, morphing them into their new green-skinned selves. The Orcs, now pariahs with no home, turned to a tribal lifestyle, settling villages wherever they desired. This typically led them to settle in High Rock and Hammerfell, causing rifts between them and the locals, who would drive them out. Now the Orcs live in scarce strongholds with no primary home aside from the city of Orsinium, the only real large kingdom the Orcs have. Still following Malekith, regardless of his corruption, the Orcs are typically known as master armor and weaponsmiths, as well as brutal warriors famous for two-handed battle axes and warhammers. In a sense, the corruption of Trinimac turned the Orcs into the exact opposite of every other elven race. Something less magically inclined, something not very dexterous, yet very physically strong and more beast-like. Which leads me to our last group, the Beast races. There are only 2 playable beast races in the Elder Scrolls, and both are rather interesting in their own rights, and have entire provinces to themselves as their homelands. To the east of the Bosmer homelands of Valenwood, we will find the exotic lands known as Elsewhere, home to the Khajiit. The Khajiit are a cat-like race, notably covered in fur, with cat ears, tail, and so on. They even have various forms of feline patterns and colors, ranging from house cats to tigers and lions, really any kind of feline. Khajiit are known for their exceptional ability as acrobats and thieves due to their innate cat-like reflexes and heightened senses, giving them the mobility advantage in most confrontations. However, many Khajiit are known to take on the life of merchants as well, traveling across Tamriel to peddle their wares and buy exotic goods of their own to bring back home along with their riches. Some of their business practices and reflexive skills, however, has led to a widely held stereotype in Tamriel that all Khajiit are thieves, scammers, and drug dealers, the last one being a result of their notable appreciation for moon sugar, which can be used to create the potent drug skooma. There is also the potential alienating factor in that the Khajiit speak in the third person, which nobody else does. Beyond this, however, one interesting note about the Khajiit, along with the other beast race I'll mention, is that they are both seemingly native to Tamriel itself, having lived on the continent long before the elves began to expand out of Somerset, and certainly long before the precursor races to man, such as the Atmorans, would arrive. Speaking of, the other beast race in question are the Argonians. The Argonians are a race of humanoid lizard people that hail from Blackmarsh at the southeasternmost edge of Tamriel. The Argonians, along with their homeland, are arguably one of, if not the most enigmatic race in all of Tamriel as far as the playable races are concerned. Not much is known of the Argonians' origins other than legends, most of which claim they were created by the Hist, a race of powerful sentient trees that the Argonians connect and commune with regularly by drinking their sap. On their own, the Argonians are already notable for their immunity to many diseases, resistance to poison, and their ability to breathe underwater as a result of living in the highly inhospitable swamps of Blackmarsh. Though it is believed that the sap of these Hist trees has given the lizard men certain unique abilities, such as being granted visions or knowledge. It is even said that the Hist can telepathically speak to Argonians who have consumed the sap, and that this, combined with the Hist's ability to seemingly view the future, allowed the Argonians to rally and defeat the forces of Mehrunes Dagon during the Oblivion Crisis, prompting the Daedra to force shut their own Oblivion gates in fear of the Argonians invading in retaliation, which has given this mysterious race a new and more ferocious reputation, amongst other things. And those are the races of Tamriel, at least the primary ones that you can usually play as. Like I said, no details about Fomer, Dwemer, dragons, or anything like that here. Who knows, maybe I'll do another video at some point where I talk about some of those. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this little rundown of Tamriel's inhabitants, and I hope to see you again soon. This has been TheRatMan, and I will see you all later. And lastly, a special thank you shout out to my Patreon with a $5 a month pledge is Scarlet. Thank you for the $5.